The Gilded Age stands as a defining period in American history, characterized by rapid economic growth, industrialization, and dramatic social change. Amidst this era of unprecedented opulence and transformation, four families, the Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, Carnegies, and Astors, emerged as towering symbols of wealth and influence. The Vanderbilts, with their vast fortunes from railroads and shipping, epitomized the era's extravagant lifestyle. The Rockefellers, innovators in the oil industry, combined immense wealth with a commitment to philanthropy. The Carnegies, fueled by the steel industry, channeled their fortunes into monumental contributions to education and culture. Meanwhile, the Astors, investing in real estate and social prominence, represented the sophisticated elite of New York. As we explore the legacies of these iconic dynasties, we uncover not only their extraordinary achievements, but also the intricate dynamics that defined their rise and fall, showcasing the transformative impact of American ambition and enterprise. You might have encountered the name of this prominent and opulently wealthy dynasty from America's Gilded Age in various places, perhaps a hotel, a library, a subway station, or a town named after them. You might recall that one of their members perished aboard the Titanic, or that their modern descendants are occasionally featured in tabloids in both the US and UK. But who exactly were these titans of industry and society? Today, we will unravel the story of the Astor family, delve into their illustrious history, and explore their scandals and legacies. The Astor family's journey began with Jovan and Greta Astor, who emigrated from northern Italy to Zurich, Switzerland in the early 1600s. The family's American saga began with Johann Jacob Astor, born in 1763 in Waldorf, now part of modern-day Germany. As the youngest of four sons born to a butcher, Johann embarked on a new chapter of his life at the age of 16, when he moved to London with his elder brother George to work in their uncle's musical instrument business. In London, Johann adopted the anglicized name John Jacob Astor. The end of the American Revolution saw the 20-year-old John Jacob setting sail for Baltimore with aspirations of working in his brother Henry's butcher shop in New York City. Despite his lack of formal education, his cleverness and affable nature made a significant impact. During his voyage, he encountered an American fur trader whose success left a lasting impression on him. In the late 17th and 18th centuries, the fur trade was a dominant force in North America. The demand for fur, particularly for European fashion, led to extensive hunting of beavers, otters, bears, and other animals. This trade had profound effects on Native American tribes, making them reliant on European goods and often leading to conflicts over hunting grounds, notably the French and Indian War in the mid-18th century. Additionally, overhunting caused severe ecological damage. John Jacob Astor settled in a boarding house and courted Sarah Cox Todd, the landlady's daughter. With her dowry of $300, they began purchasing raw hides from Native Americans, which John Jacob processed and resold at a substantial profit in London. He soon established his own fur business and also sold his uncle's musical instruments. His business acumen grew rapidly, and he expanded his operations aggressively. Sarah Astor was an integral partner in this success, managing the business while raising 8 children. Her exceptional business skills were so remarkable that in 1817, she faced accusations of witchcraft, an unfounded charge reflecting the incredulity of her competitors. The Astors also ventured into international trade, sending a ship laden with furs to China, returning with spices and tea, and making substantial profits both ways. In 1807, the Embargo Act severely restricted trade between the US and Canada, cutting off a primary source of furs. Astor used his considerable influence to persuade President Thomas Jefferson to authorize the creation of the American Fur Company. This company established new trading territories along the routes explored by Lewis and Clark. Astor personally financed an expedition to the Pacific, leading to the discovery of the southern pass through the Rocky Mountains, which became a crucial route for settlers on the Oregon, Mormon, and California trails. In 1811, the American Fur Company established Fort Astoria at the mouth of the Columbia River, which was the first American settlement on the Pacific coast, now known as Astoria, Oregon, my father's hometown, and a place dear to me. The War of 1812 disrupted European trade, prompting John Jacob Astor to engage in the opium trade. He acquired 10 tons of opium from the Ottoman Empire and transported it to China, where it contributed to a widespread addiction crisis. The ensuing opium wars were a direct result of this trade, with China fighting back against the debilitating impact of the drug. By the early 19th century, John Jacob Astor had established an extensive global presence through his ventures. His maritime empire spanned across the world's oceans, and his commercial outposts were strategically located around the globe. In New York City, Astor seized a fortuitous opportunity to acquire a 75-acre parcel of land at a remarkably discounted rate from a distressed whiskey distiller. This property, which would later become the bustling Times Square, was initially subdivided and sold off, yielding a substantial profit. Astor's keen sense of real estate investment led him to divest most of his interests in the fur trading business to amass large tracts of undeveloped land in New York. His prescient vision allowed him to accurately forecast the city's northward expansion. He capitalized on this foresight by purchasing land from former Vice President Aaron Burr, who had fallen into disgrace after his infamous duel with Alexander Hamilton. Astor's ventures included the construction of inexpensive tenements to accommodate the influx of immigrants into the city, inadvertently earning him the moniker of one of New York's early slumlords. Despite his growing influence, he and his wife Sarah resided in a grand mansion on the then unfashionable Broadway. Their considerable wealth granted them access to the upper echelons of New York society. However, Astor's brusque demeanor and lack of refinement led to his ostracization by established Dutch families, who looked down upon his unpolished manners and his indifference to the philanthropic causes they held dear. Across the East River, a village in Queens named Astoria, in hopes of enticing Astor to fund a civic center, never materialized. Astor's deep affection for his wealth persisted until Sarah's death in 1842. Grieving her loss, he sought to transform his sorrow into financial gain by constructing a new mansion further uptown. The former family residence was demolished to make way for the Astor House, an opulent hotel that boasted cutting-edge amenities such as gas lighting and hot water on every floor. This establishment, charging $2 a night, was one of the earliest examples of luxury accommodation in the United States. By the time of his death in 1848, Astor had amassed a fortune of $20 million, equivalent to approximately $600 million today, or about 1% of the nation's GDP, the same proportion held by Jeff Bezos in contemporary times. Astor was interred alongside Sarah in Trinity Church Cemetery in Upper Manhattan. In a final twist, his will, surprising many, included substantial bequests to fund a poorhouse and orphanage in his hometown of Waldorf, Germany, and the creation of the Astor Library, which would later evolve into the New York Public Library. Streets and institutions such as historic Astor Street in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Astor Place in Manhattan bear his name in remembrance. Astor's eldest son, John Jacob III, struggled with mental illness, leading to the bulk of the family's fortune being inherited by his younger brother, William Backhouse Astor Jr. William, having spent part of his youth in Germany, took over the family business, which was subsequently renamed John Jacob Astor and Son. William married Margaret Armstrong, the daughter of a senator, and they had 7 children. Despite his financial success, William's personal life was marred by unhappiness, with a friend noting that he seemed imprisoned by the wealth his father had amassed. William's strategic investments included acquiring a disused farm, which was later intersected by Fifth Avenue, the premier address of New York's elite. His estate was bequeathed to his two eldest sons, who built their own mansions. William Backhouse Astor Jr. passed away in 1875 at the age of 83. During this era, American aristocracy began to model itself after European nobility, adopting the practice of primogeniture to preserve wealth within the family. While daughters were provided with dowries to secure advantageous marriages, the Astor family's three sons, John Jacob III, William Backhouse Jr., and Henry, faced their own familial conflicts. Henry's marriage to Malvina Dinard, a farmer's daughter, was met with disapproval from his family, resulting in his estrangement and eventual separation from his wealthy relatives. The family dynamics continued to shift as John Jacob III joined the family business and married Charlotte Augusta Gibbs, a prominent philanthropist and supporter of the newly established Children's Aid Society. Their efforts included founding the New York Cancer Hospital, reflecting their commitment to social causes. John Jacob also served with distinction as a brigadier general in the Civil War, viewing his military service as a meaningful departure from the family's commercial pursuits. Meanwhile, William Backhouse Jr., who had entered an arranged marriage with Caroline Scherer Horn, experienced marital discord due to his frequent infidelities and extravagant lifestyle. Caroline, who had been raised with high societal expectations, struggled with her husband's behavior, leading to further family strife. In the late 19th century, following the American Civil War, New York City experienced an era of unprecedented growth and opulence. The influx of wealthy immigrants and newly minted millionaires from the western United States transformed the city into a bustling metropolis of affluence and societal ambition. Amid this transformation, Caroline Astor emerged as a formidable arbiter of high society, determined to uphold a stringent standard of etiquette. Caroline Astor, who had been a prominent figure in New York's social circles, assumed the role of gatekeeper to the exclusive echelons of society. Her influence was so extensive that only those who received her calling card could gain entry into the most coveted social events. Her grand balls became legendary, and her home was the epitome of elite social gatherings. The notion of the 400, a term attributed to Caroline's exclusive circle, became synonymous with high society. This figure was not an arbitrary number. It was popularized by Ward McAllister, Caroline's close associate and fellow socialite. Among those whom Caroline considered unworthy were the Vanderbilts, a family whose fortunes had skyrocketed with the expansion of the railroad industry. After repeatedly rebuffing social climber Alva Vanderbilt, Alva retaliated by hosting a grand housewarming party to which Caroline's daughters were explicitly uninvited. This slight forced Caroline to begrudgingly extend an invitation to Alva, though their rivalry continued unabated. Following the death of her brother-in-law, John Jacob Astor III, Caroline asserted her social dominance by having calling cards printed that proclaimed her as Mrs. Astor next door. This claim, however, did not sit well with her nephew, William Waldorf Astor. As the son of the eldest Astor son, William believed that his wife, M, deserved the title of Mrs. Astor, though she lacked Caroline's social standing. Frustrated, William Waldorf Astor relocated his family to London, declaring that America is no fit place for a gentleman. In a dramatic gesture, he demolished his Fifth Avenue mansion and constructed the opulent Waldorf Hotel in its place. Caroline endured a year of living next to the construction site of her rival's hotel, followed by the intrusion of a towering German Renaissance chateau. This new development, coupled with the constant flow of hotel guests, further encroached upon her once uncontested social realm. In response, Caroline's son, Jack Astor, contemplated tearing down their mansion and erecting a stable to drive away the hotel's patrons. Ultimately, he chose to build a hotel of their own, the Astoria, which, in a twist of good business sense, was eventually merged with the Waldorf Hotel to create the renowned Waldorf Astoria. During this period, Caroline's marriage to her husband became strained. He spent much of his time aboard the Ambassador, then the largest private yacht in the world, nicknamed the Floating Harem. Based in Jacksonville, Florida, he made substantial investments in real estate and citrus groves, contributing to the early Florida tourism industry. He passed away in 1892, at the age of 62. Caroline continued to wield influence in New York society until her death in 1908 at the age of 78. With William Waldorf Astor's departure to Great Britain, two branches of the Astor family emerged. William Waldorf Astor sought to establish his own legacy separate from his American roots by entering British politics. Appointed ambassador to Italy by President Chester A. Arthur, he developed a passion for art and gradually distanced himself from American affairs. Upon relocating his family to England, he acquired and restored several significant estates, including Cliveden and Hewell Grange. His contributions to British society earned him a peerage, and he became a member of the House of Lords. William Waldorf's son, Waldorf Astor, married Nancy Longhorn Shaw, the daughter of a Southern Railroad magnate. Their marriage was notable for the presentation of the stunning Sony diamond, a 55-carat gem with a storied history. Nancy made headlines as the first female member of the British Parliament, where she championed numerous causes, including raising the drinking age and establishing nursery schools. Her tenure was marked by her controversial stance of appeasing Adolf Hitler, which led to her political downfall. In the American branch of the Astor family, Caroline and William's 4 daughters were groomed for marriages into established families. Helen Astor wed James Roosevelt, the half-brother of future President Franklin D. Roosevelt, while their only son, Jack Astor IV, married socialite Ava Lowe. Jack, a complex figure with a penchant for invention and innovation, made notable contributions to technology and the hospitality industry. His inventions included an early bicycle brake and methods for generating gas from peat moss. He also pioneered the inclusion of room service in hotels and created iconic dishes like Waldorf salad. Jack Astor's life ended tragically aboard the RMS Titanic in 1912. During the ship's ill-fated voyage, he sacrificed his chance for survival to ensure his wife and her maid were safely aboard a lifeboat. Jack's body was later recovered, and he was buried alongside his family in Trinity Church Cemetery. His widow, Malene, faced challenges with her stepchildren and the family estate. Jack's son, Vincent Astor, distinguished himself by pursuing philanthropy and social reforms. He contributed to urban development and supported the emerging film industry. Vincent's life was marked by a series of marriages and philanthropic endeavors, including the establishment of the Astor Foundation. His second wife, Mary, had an affair, leading Vincent to propose her friend Brooke Russell as a replacement. Vincent's philanthropic legacy included significant contributions to New York's cultural and educational institutions. Vincent's sister, Ava Alice Muriel Astor, received $10 million from their father and married a Russian prince. Her post-divorce life included several marriages. The posthumous child of Jack Astor, John Jacob Astor Sixen, known as Jakey, faced significant familial and societal challenges. His attempts to assert his place within the Astor legacy were met with contention, particularly in light of his inheritance compared to his half-brother Vincent's. Jakey's tumultuous life ended in 1992, leaving the remaining American Astors in relative obscurity compared to their ancestors. Jakey's grandson, Gregory Todd Astor, achieved recognition by portraying his great-grandfather in a Broadway production of Titanic. The Astor family's saga, spanning continents and generations, reflects the complexities of wealth, power, and social influence in American and British society. The Vanderbilt family, once the wealthiest dynasty in America, epitomized the rapid rise and fall of Gilded Age fortunes. At their zenith, the Vanderbilts accumulated vast wealth through pioneering ventures in shipping and railroads, but their financial empire experienced a swift and dramatic decline. By 1973, a reunion of 120 Vanderbilts revealed that not a single member had retained millionaire status. This narrative explores the rise and fall of the Vanderbilt fortune. The story began with Cornelius, the Commodore Vanderbilt, born into a modest farming family in Staten Island, New York. In 1810, at just 16 years old, Vanderbilt borrowed $100 from his mother, a sum equivalent to over $2,100 today, according to the official Data Foundation. This loan was used to purchase a small boat, marking the inception of his career in transport and freight. In an era marked by rapid industrialization, Vanderbilt's shrewd investments in steamships and railroads propelled him to build an empire that would dominate the transportation industry. By the mid-19th century, his New York Central Railroad became a cornerstone of the nation's infrastructure, establishing him as the wealthiest individual in America. At his death in 1877, Vanderbilt's estate was valued at $100 million, equivalent to nearly $2.5 billion today. His wealth surpassed that held by the U.S. Treasury at the time. Vanderbilt reportedly advised his eldest son, William Henry "Billy" Vanderbilt, "Any fool can make a fortune. It takes a man of brains to hold on to it." Billy Vanderbilt, inheriting the empire in 1877, initially seemed poised to uphold his father's legacy. He doubled the family fortune by 1885 through astute business practices. However, the Vanderbilt family's downfall began to take shape with the generational shift. Unlike his father, Billy was less aggressive and more burdened by the responsibility of wealth. As recounted by Arthur T. Vanderbilt II in Fortune's Children, the fall of the House of Vanderbilt, Billy was markedly different from his father. While Cornelius was known for his ruthless business tactics, Billy was more conciliatory and financially anxious. In 1879, Billy Vanderbilt sold a portion of his New York Central shares, which allowed him to divest from the intense public scrutiny that came with sole ownership. He invested the proceeds in government bonds, a notably conservative move for a Gilded Age tycoon. Despite this conservative approach, Billy managed to increase his wealth to nearly $200 million by 1883, making him the wealthiest man globally. However, he saw his fortune as a source of considerable stress. Upon his death in 1885, he divided his fortune between his two eldest sons, rather than entrusting it to a single successor. The Gilded Age, a period characterized by rapid economic growth and stark social stratification, saw the Vanderbilts vying for acceptance in New York's elite society. The social gatekeepers of the era, Caroline Schermerhorn Astor and Ward McAllister, controlled access to the upper echelons of New York society through their list of 400. The Vanderbilts, despite their immense wealth, initially found themselves excluded due to their perceived lack of refinement. William K. Willie Vanderbilt, the son of Billy Vanderbilt, married Alva Smith, a socialite intent on establishing the family's place in high society. Alva invested heavily in constructing a grand mansion on Fifth Avenue, among the most opulent residences on Millionaires' Row. In 1883, she hosted a lavish ball estimated to cost over $250,000, equivalent to over $6 million today. This extravagant event successfully secured their place on the list of 400, yet the family's expenditures soon began to erode their wealth. In stark contrast to the frugality of their forebears, the third and fourth generations of Vanderbilts led lives of opulence and excess. They invested heavily in a series of grand residences, including the famed Triple Palaces on Fifth Avenue. This penchant for ostentatious displays led to competition among family members, exemplified by Alva Vanderbilt's Petit Chateau and her sister-in-law Alice Vanderbilt's construction of the largest single-family home in New York City at the time. As the Vanderbilt fortune dissipated, the extravagant lifestyles and internal rivalries played a significant role in the decline of what had once been one of the most formidable dynasties in American history. As the 1920s drew to a close, many of the grand Vanderbilt mansions, symbols of the family's opulence, were sold to real estate developers and subsequently demolished. While his relatives in New York were erecting some of the city's most magnificent homes, George Washington Vanderbilt II and his wife Edith chose a different path, selecting Asheville, North Carolina, as the site for their monumental project. Construction of the Biltmore Estate, begun in 1889 and completed in 1895, was an undertaking of epic proportions. Covering 30,000 acres and featuring a 250-room French Renaissance chateau, the estate cost nearly $6 million, a staggering amount equivalent to approximately $1.6 billion in today's currency. The Biltmore Estate remains the largest privately owned home in the United States and is currently managed by Vanderbilt descendants as a prominent tourist attraction and national landmark. Philanthropy was another significant aspect of the Vanderbilt legacy. Cornelius Vanderbilt, known as the Commodore, was not only a titan of industry, but also a benefactor. In 1873, he donated $1 million to establish Central University in Nashville, which would later be renamed Vanderbilt University in his honor. His son, William Henry Vanderbilt, continued this tradition of giving, leaving substantial bequests to institutions like the YMCA and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in his will. The Vanderbilt family's charitable contributions extended into the next generations. Cornelius Vanderbilt II, who managed the family's investments and businesses, made major donations to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Yale University, and Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons. His brother, William Kissam Vanderbilt, who initially managed the family business, later shifted focus to cultural pursuits, including yacht racing, art collection, and involvement with the Metropolitan Opera. The youngest son, George Washington Vanderbilt II, made generous donations to Columbia University, the American Fine Arts Society, and the New York Public Library. The Vanderbilt fortune was built during an era with minimal business regulations. The family's vast wealth was largely accumulated through monopolistic practices in shipping and railroads, which faced few restrictions or taxation. However, the early 20th century brought significant changes. The introduction of estate, gift, and income taxes, coupled with the impact of global conflicts like World War I, began to erode the Vanderbilts' wealth. The Great Depression further exacerbated their financial difficulties. To sustain their lavish lifestyles and maintain their grand estates, the Vanderbilts were forced to adapt. For instance, Biltmore Estate was opened to the public in 1930 as a means to boost local tourism and generate income for its preservation. Despite these efforts, the family's extravagant spending and lack of investment in new ventures led to severe financial strain. Alfred Gwynne Vanderbilt, the third son of Cornelius Vanderbilt II and grandson of William Henry Vanderbilt, was poised to inherit the family's fortune. However, his life was cut short at the age of 38 when he perished aboard the RMS Lusitania, which was torpedoed by a German submarine during World War I. His untimely death led to the rapid division of his $72 million estate among his surviving family members, leaving little opportunity for growth. Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, the great-grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt and younger brother of Alfred, led a notably different life. Reginald's involvement in the family business was minimal, and he squandered his inheritance on gambling and alcohol. On his 21st birthday, he lost $70,000 gambling. Despite warnings from doctors about his deteriorating health, Reginald continued his reckless lifestyle and married a much younger socialite, Gloria Morgan. He died from liver cirrhosis in 1925 at the age of 45, leaving his widow and young daughter to live off a $5 million trust fund. As the Vanderbilt fortune dwindled, the decline of New York Central Railroad, a central pillar of the family's wealth, mirrored their financial struggles. Once a dominant force in the transportation industry, New York Central Railroad faced significant challenges as alternative modes of transport gained prominence. The company sold its shares in 1954 and eventually went bankrupt in 1970, marking the end of an era. The daughter of Reginald Vanderbilt, Gloria Vanderbilt, would go on to become a renowned fashion designer, writer, and socialite. Her most famous contribution was her line of jeans in the early 1980s. Despite her public success, Gloria's personal wealth, once estimated at $200 million, had significantly diminished by the time of her death in 2019. Her son, Anderson Cooper, inherited most of her estate, which had a true value of approximately $1.5 million. The Vanderbilt family's dramatic rise and fall serves as a potent reminder of the transient nature of wealth and the impact of changing economic and social landscapes. In the early 19th century, the mere mention of John D. Rockefeller evoked a sense of awe and trepidation. Not only was he the world's first billionaire, but he also became one of the wealthiest individuals in recorded history. Rockefeller's vast empire, centered around Standard Oil, established an unparalleled monopoly that reshaped the global economic landscape. His rise was marked by aggressive tactics, outmaneuvering competitors, consolidating multiple industries, exerting influence over governmental entities, and treating business competition with the ferocity of warfare. His ruthless strategies and clandestine dealings earned him numerous adversaries, including fierce rivalries with industrial giants like Andrew Carnegie and even confrontations with US presidents. Yet, before he ascended to the zenith of the oil industry, Rockefeller's beginnings were far more humble. John Davison Rockefeller was born on July 8, 1839, in Richford, New York. His early years were marked by profound poverty. His father, William Rockefeller, was a figure of notoriety in the local community, but not for reasons of commendable reputation. Known derisively as Devil Bill, William Rockefeller led a life marked by itinerancy and deception. He was a man of varied talents: athlete, ventriloquist, hunter, hypnotist, and even an animal trainer. Among his peculiar achievements was winning a bear in a competition and teaching it to perform tricks. Despite his flamboyant persona, William was an unreliable and often absent father, frequently disappearing under the guise of various aliases, such as Dr. William Livingston. During these absences, he peddled dubious herbal remedies and elixirs, leaving his family to grapple with poverty and instability. Rockefeller's mother, Eliza Davison Rockefeller, instilled in him a strong sense of religious faith and responsibility. As the family's primary breadwinner during William's absences, she relied heavily on young John, who from an early age was engaged in grueling farm work and academic studies. This dual life of labor and education imbued him with discipline and a work ethic that would later become cornerstones of his success. Despite his tender age, John demonstrated entrepreneurial flair by collecting and selling wild turkey eggs, which contributed significantly to his family's meager income. In 1849, when John was 10, scandal struck the Rockefeller household. William was accused of assaulting a young woman. Although the allegations were never proven, the ensuing public scandal forced the Rockefellers to relocate. Instead of mending his ways, William continued his deceitful practices, marrying another woman under yet another alias. This further destabilized the Rockefeller family, compelling John to assume even greater responsibilities. By the age of 16, John was ready to embark on his professional journey. However, with his father largely absent and his family in dire financial straits, John was unable to pursue higher education. Faced with limited opportunities, he dropped out of school 2 months before graduation and began seeking employment in Cleveland, Ohio. Despite numerous rejections, often due to his youth, John's perseverance paid off. He eventually secured a bookkeeping position at a small firm, where his meticulous penmanship and diligence impressed his employers. This job, which began on September 26, 1855, was pivotal. John commemorated this date as Job Day, a personal celebration of his first significant career milestone. Though his initial salary was modest, John's experience provided him with valuable insights into business operations and financial management. Observing the large sums of money handled by his boss ignited a fervent ambition within him. Determined to amass wealth, he adopted a mantra of self-assuredness: "I am bound to be rich." His dedication led to a modest salary increase, allowing him to contribute to his family's stability and engage in philanthropic endeavors. Despite the economic downturn that followed, Rockefeller's resolve remained unshaken, setting the stage for his eventual dominance in the oil industry. Amid the economic turmoil of the early 1860s, John D. Rockefeller found himself in a precarious position. When one of his partners departed from the firm, all of the company's financial responsibilities fell squarely on Rockefeller's shoulders. As the firm's lead accountant, Rockefeller faced the harsh reality of a steep decline in revenues due to the economic downturn. Despite these challenges, Rockefeller's confidence remained unshaken. His 2 years of experience had fortified his resolve, and he began preparing for a pivotal move, launching his own enterprise. During his tenure as a bookkeeper, Rockefeller had forged a valuable friendship with Maurice Clark, a 28-year-old chemist and businessman. At just 18 years old, Rockefeller had earned a solid reputation in Cleveland. Clark, aware of Rockefeller's burgeoning potential, proposed a partnership in a new venture. After saving a modest sum, they founded Clark and Rockefeller, focusing on buying and reselling essential goods such as grain, fish, beans, and meat. The business, though demanding, filled the partners with immense pride. Rockefeller, initially reserved, quickly became known for his adeptness in sales, earning the respect of older industry professionals who dubbed him Mr. Rockefeller. Despite their early successes, Clark and Rockefeller faced a significant challenge: scaling their operations due to a lack of capital. To address this, they adopted a clever strategy to enhance their financial appeal. They publicly stated that their firm was seeking a $10,000 investment, which created an impression of greater financial strength. This tactic succeeded in securing a $5,000 loan, providing them with the necessary funds to expand. The onset of the American Civil War had a profound impact on the economy of the northern states, particularly in Cleveland, which became a crucial supply hub for the Union Army. The war-induced inflation drove up local food prices, causing Clark and Rockefeller's profits to soar. By 1862, the company realized a profit of $177,000, equivalent to over $500,000 in today's money. This success presented Rockefeller with a new opportunity. Before the widespread use of electricity, lighting homes required burning oil derived from whale fat. The laborious and expensive process of whaling, coupled with the overexploitation of whale populations, prompted a search for alternative sources of oil. In 1859, a breakthrough came in Pennsylvania with the discovery of a method to extract crude oil using a wooden derrick. This innovation, combined with the development of sulfuric acid refining techniques, made oil production more efficient and profitable. Crude oil, now known as black gold, gained prominence. Rockefeller was introduced to Samuel Andrews, a young inventor seeking investors for an oil refinery in Cleveland. Andrews had perfected a method for refining crude oil into kerosene, a superior lighting fuel. Recognizing the potential, Rockefeller and Clark decided to invest $4,000 in Andrews' refinery while maintaining their focus on their produce business. As kerosene's popularity soared, it became clear that the oil refinery was the more lucrative venture. In 1865, Rockefeller and Clark made a decisive move. They abandoned their produce business to concentrate entirely on oil refining. However, the oil market was highly volatile, with prices fluctuating dramatically due to unpredictable supply. In times of abundance, prices plummeted to as low as 10 cents per gallon, while shortages drove prices up to $14. To navigate this instability, Rockefeller chose to specialize solely in refining rather than oil production. The business faced immense pressure, and the stress proved too much for Clark, who decided to sell his share of the company. Rockefeller acquired Clark's share for $772,500, approximately $1,035 million today, and fully committed to the oil business. His faith in the industry was soon rewarded when a substantial new oil field was discovered in Pennsylvania, confirming the viability of oil as a long-term investment. Rockefeller's newfound confidence was complemented by his marriage to a devout Baptist, aligning his personal and professional lives. With a stable home life and the northern economy thriving post-war, Rockefeller rebranded the company as Standard Oil. He expanded operations by establishing a second refinery and began exporting kerosene to Europe. To manage the growing enterprise, Rockefeller partnered with Henry Flagler, a fellow entrepreneur with a shared vision of building an empire. Flagler's ruthlessness and strategic acumen mirrored Rockefeller's own ambitions. Together, they approached business with a militaristic strategy, aiming to dominate the market and eliminate competition. The refining industry was becoming increasingly competitive as new entrants discovered the refining process, making Rockefeller's product less unique. In response, Rockefeller and Flagler formed strategic alliances to enhance Standard Oil's market position and undermine rivals. Their relentless pursuit of dominance in the oil industry would eventually reshape the landscape of American business, setting the stage for Rockefeller's unprecedented success. One of John D. Rockefeller's most strategic moves involved secretly colluding with the railroads to secure better transportation costs than his competitors. During the 19th century, oil transportation relied heavily on an extensive network of trains, primarily controlled by three major railroad companies: the New York Central, the Erie, and the Pennsylvania Railroad, the most powerful of the time. The routing of these railroads presented challenges and opportunities. The New York Central and the Erie railroads were inclined to transport oil to Cleveland refineries, while the Pennsylvania Railroad found it more profitable to ship oil directly to New York City or Philadelphia. This disparity led the Pennsylvania Railroad to pull out of Cleveland, effectively declaring that the city would no longer be a significant refining center. As a result, many Cleveland refineries closed or relocated, causing a significant economic blow to the New York Central and Erie railroads, which had invested heavily in the area and were losing business. Instead of panicking, Rockefeller saw this as an opportunity. Recognizing the Erie and New York Central Railroad's desperate need for business, he leveraged their situation to secure favorable terms for Standard Oil. Rockefeller negotiated a deal with the Erie Railroad for a 75% discount on official shipping costs, in exchange for a steady order of 60 carloads of refined oil daily. With the New York Central Railroad, he struck a deal to pay $165 per barrel shipped, significantly less than the official rate of $240. Despite the railroad's initial reluctance, the guaranteed consistent shipments made the deals attractive. The secret nature of these railroad rebates was crucial. Standard Oil's competitors were unaware of these preferential rates and had to pay full price for transportation. This advantage allowed Rockefeller to initiate a price war, slashing oil prices so low that his competitors, burdened by higher transportation costs, could not compete. Many rivals went bankrupt as a result, leaving Standard Oil with a significantly reduced level of competition. Once the competition dwindled, Rockefeller was able to increase prices again, further consolidating his dominance. Though morally questionable, Rockefeller's railroad rebates were legal at the time. Antitrust laws that would later address such monopolistic practices did not yet exist, allowing Rockefeller to exploit these advantages without legal repercussions. His aggressive pricing strategy proved effective, but it also created a problem. A massive surplus of oil led to falling prices, threatening the stability of the industry. In response to the industry-wide crisis, Rockefeller and Henry Flagler considered a bold solution, forming an even more dominant monopoly. By 1872, with oil prices having dropped another 25%, Rockefeller sought to stabilize the industry through a new alliance. He reached out to Tom Scott, the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, despite their previous rivalry. Scott proposed a secret alliance between the largest railroads and a select group of major refiners, including Standard Oil. This coalition, known as the South Improvement Company, SIC, was designed to consolidate control over the oil industry. The agreement provided Standard Oil with a 50% rebate on transportation costs in exchange for exclusive shipping through the participating railroads. Additionally, Standard Oil's competitors faced higher shipping costs, and some of the money from these shipments was indirectly funneled to Rockefeller. The railroads also provided Rockefeller with detailed information about competitors' shipments, allowing him to undercut their prices. The SIC's creation was intended to crush competitors by making it impossible for them to compete with Standard Oil's advantages. However, news of the alliance leaked, and public outrage followed. People blamed Rockefeller and Scott for the sudden spike in railroad rates, leading to widespread protests, violence, and vandalism. Oil miners also boycotted the SIC, depriving Standard Oil of a crucial supply of crude oil. Within 2 months, the SIC was disbanded, a major setback for Rockefeller and Scott. Despite the backlash, Rockefeller remained undeterred. He decided to shift his strategy from covert deals to a more public and aggressive approach. The fallout from the SIC actually played to his advantage. The rumors of a secret cartel, despite being unfounded, created a climate of fear among competitors. In what became known as the Cleveland Massacre, Rockefeller used this climate of fear to his advantage, intimidating 22 out of 26 oil refining companies in Cleveland into selling their businesses at a fraction of their true value. Even though the South Improvement Company, SIC, had ultimately failed, the fear it generated forced many refiners into a state of panic, leading them to sell their companies to Rockefeller. Rockefeller, ever strategic, capitalized on this situation. He showed these refiners Standard Oil's impressive financial health and demonstrated how well the company was performing, proving that he could outlast them all. Faced with the choice between continuing a losing battle and cashing out, most refiners chose to sell. When acquiring these companies, Rockefeller offered only two options: sign a contract prohibiting future participation in the industry or join Standard Oil. Most competitors opted to join Standard Oil, bringing their expertise under Rockefeller's control. This allowed Rockefeller to integrate the brightest minds in the industry and significantly enhance the company's operations. Rockefeller outfitted the newly acquired refineries with cutting-edge oil refining technology, drastically reducing costs. By mid-1873, Standard Oil controlled an empire with a growing number of highly efficient refineries, collectively capable of shipping over 1 million barrels of kerosene annually. Cleveland became a focal point for refining, but the broader economy faced a severe downturn. On September 18, 1873, known as Black Thursday, a series of bank failures triggered a national recession that lasted 6 years. Oil prices plummeted, not due to oversupply, but because of a severe drop in demand. Standard Oil, forced to shut down 4 of its 6 main Cleveland refineries, faced a barrel price as low as 48 cents, cheaper than water. The industry was in disarray, with miners, railroads, and refiners all facing bankruptcy. However, Standard Oil's careful financial management, excellent credit, and modernized refineries allowed it to remain profitable during this crisis. Rockefeller saw the economic downturn as an opportunity. He knew that refiners in other major centers like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York were also struggling. Thus, he initiated a nationwide buyout campaign, using indirect tactics to pressure reluctant sellers. For example, he would purchase all available refining machinery and barrels, making it impossible for competitors to produce or package oil. If competitors managed to produce oil, Rockefeller would reserve all available railroad space, preventing them from shipping it. Additionally, Rockefeller pressured railroads to raise prices for other refiners, driving them toward bankruptcy. By waiting for competitors to be on the brink of ruin, he offered to buy them out for a fraction of their worth. This ruthless approach allowed Standard Oil to dominate not just Cleveland, but also Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York. Rockefeller built a network of pipelines to reduce reliance on railroads, further decreasing costs and cementing Standard Oil's control over the industry. This network earned Standard Oil the nickname the Octopus due to its extensive reach. Despite his immense success, Rockefeller faced increasing public criticism. Standard Oil's monopolistic practices led to negative press, with the company described as the most cruel, impudent, pressing and grasping monopoly in the country. The railroads, once a critical business partner, were now in competition with Rockefeller. Tom Scott, head of the Pennsylvania Railroad, began constructing his own pipelines and refineries, directly challenging Rockefeller. Rockefeller responded with an all-out assault on the Pennsylvania Railroad. He canceled Standard Oil's business with the railroad, redirected shipments to competitors, and lowered kerosene prices to force rivals to do the same. He convinced other railroads to drastically reduce shipping fees, further hurting the Pennsylvania Railroad. This campaign caused severe financial distress for the Pennsylvania Railroad, leading to layoffs, wage cuts, and violent labor strikes. The Pennsylvania Railroad, a once dominant force, was forced to concede. Rockefeller and his partner, Henry Flagler, offered a deal to help the railroad survive in exchange for exclusive shipping agreements and secret rebates. This agreement effectively gave Rockefeller control over the railroads and further solidified his dominance in the oil industry. By controlling 90% of the oil refining industry, Rockefeller became one of the most powerful men in America. His success, however, attracted significant scrutiny. The rivalry with Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate who had been mentored by Scott, intensified. Carnegie, motivated by Scott's downfall, became a significant rival to Rockefeller. Despite his public controversies and immense wealth, Rockefeller lived a relatively modest personal life. He preferred spending time with his family over indulging in luxury and remained focused on managing his empire from New York. However, the oil industry was on the verge of transformation. Thomas Edison's invention of the light bulb and a major new oil deposit in northern Ohio posed potential threats to Standard Oil's dominance. While many of his executives panicked over these developments, Rockefeller remained composed, ready to turn the emerging crisis into another opportunity. Until this point, Standard Oil had focused primarily on horizontal integration, acquiring other refining companies. However, the discovery of oil in Ohio presented an opportunity for Rockefeller to shift strategies. He realized that to fully capitalize on the new oil fields, he needed to implement vertical integration, taking control of every step in the oil supply chain, from extraction to refining, transportation, storage, and distribution. Rockefeller began buying land in Ohio, drilling hundreds of wells, and laying new pipelines for transportation. Despite these efforts, Ohio's oil had a significant drawback: a foul odor, earning it the nickname "scun oil." This unpleasant characteristic made it almost unsellable, with prices dropping to as low as 15 cents per barrel. While other companies abandoned the oil, Rockefeller saw it as a challenge and hired a team of chemists to address the issue. Within a year, they discovered a method to remove the sulfur causing the bad smell, making Standard Oil the sole provider of this newly refined, cheaper oil. The discovery of oil fields in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and California further underscored America's vast petroleum reserves. Standard Oil was ideally positioned to exploit this new resource, and the rise of the automobile industry, which used gasoline as a byproduct of oil refining, provided an additional revenue stream. This development allowed Standard Oil to turn a typically discarded material into a significant profit source. Even amidst the economic depression of 1893, during which 600 banks closed, Rockefeller thrived. As he focused less on day-to-day operations and more on investment, he realized his personal investments were underperforming. To rectify this, he hired Frederick Gates, a Baptist minister, to manage his investments. Gates proved to be instrumental in transforming Rockefeller's portfolio, guiding him through strategic investments and helping him grow his fortune further. Rockefeller also involved his son, John Jr., in these financial strategies. Gates taught Jr. about investing and negotiation, turning Rockefeller's previously poor-performing investments into lucrative ventures. Under their guidance, Rockefeller's wealth expanded rapidly. One of the most significant investments Rockefeller made was in the Mesabi Range in Minnesota, which contained a massive deposit of high-quality iron ore. Iron is essential for steel production, and with Andrew Carnegie already established as a leading figure in the steel industry, Rockefeller's acquisition of this iron-rich land posed a direct threat to Carnegie. Carnegie, facing a shortage of iron ore due to his previous lack of investment in mining, was forced to negotiate with Rockefeller. In the deal, Carnegie agreed to buy a minimum of 600,000 tons of ore annually from Rockefeller's mines and transport it through Rockefeller's railroads, which he now owned. In return, Rockefeller provided Carnegie with a secret rebate and agreed not to build a steel mill. This arrangement allowed Carnegie to secure a steady supply of iron ore, while Rockefeller maintained his dominant position in the steel market. The partnership between Rockefeller and Carnegie, while competitive, highlighted the complex interplay of business strategies and alliances. Rockefeller's vertical integration not only solidified his control over the oil industry, but also positioned him to compete effectively in other sectors, including steel. As Standard Oil and Carnegie Steel began to benefit from their alliance, it seemed both men were willing to overlook their differences for mutual gain and to undermine their competitors. The partnership quickly captured the public's imagination, creating a buzz on Wall Street. Investors were eager to capitalize on the apparent unstoppable momentum of both companies. However, J.P. Morgan, a shrewd financier with grander ambitions, saw an opportunity beyond mere investment. Morgan realized that if he could consolidate Rockefeller's iron mines and Carnegie's steel business under one umbrella, he could create a steel monopoly that would surpass both companies in profitability and scale. He envisioned this new entity, U.S. Steel, as potentially the most valuable company in history. Morgan approached Rockefeller with an offer to buy the Mesabi iron mines, but Rockefeller directed Morgan to negotiate with his 27-year-old son, John Jr. Morgan, initially skeptical of dealing with a young, relatively inexperienced executive, was surprised when Jr. confidently asserted that Morgan should set the price for the Mesabi mines. This unexpected turn of events gave Jr. significant leverage in the negotiation. Morgan, taken aback by Jr.'s assertiveness, had to rethink his strategy. Eventually, he offered $88.5 million in U.S. Steel stock for complete ownership of the Mesabi mines and their operations. When U.S. Steel was formed by merging Carnegie's steel business, it became the world's first billion-dollar corporation. Rockefeller, owning a substantial portion of U.S. Steel stock, saw the value of his shares soar, further increasing his wealth. By the end of 1911, the same year Standard Oil was dissolved, Rockefeller was on the brink of becoming the world's first billionaire. However, despite his newfound fortune, Rockefeller decided to retire from the business world and devote himself to philanthropy. At over 70 years old, Rockefeller remained as energetic about his charitable work as he had been in business. Throughout his career, he had donated at least 10% of his earnings to various causes. Despite some criticisms that his donations were merely efforts to improve his public image, Rockefeller continued to give generously, often anonymously. In 1913, Rockefeller established the Rockefeller Foundation with Frederick Gates and his son John Jr. By then, he had already donated nearly $150 million. Over his lifetime, Rockefeller personally contributed a total of $540 million, with Frederick and Jr. adding an additional $537 million through the foundation. Jr. also donated another $540 million from his inheritance. The Rockefeller Foundation, over its century-long history, has donated countless billions and continues its charitable efforts today. Its initial focus on medicine and education has led to significant advancements, such as breakthroughs in medical research that have saved hundreds of thousands of lives and improvements in education that have uplifted impoverished communities. It helped build prestigious institutions and continues to support various global causes. The immense financial and philanthropic impact of John D. Rockefeller invites a complex moral debate. His legacy is marked by both remarkable achievements and controversial business practices. As the biographer of Rockefeller notes, his dual nature, both benefactor and ruthless businessman, makes him a figure of profound complexity. Despite the debate, his contributions to society through philanthropy have left an enduring mark, reflecting both the positive and negative facets of his legacy. Andrew Carnegie vividly recalled a time before the Industrial Revolution radically altered his family's life. Born in 1835 in Dunfermline, Scotland, Andrew anticipated a future much like his father's, working as a handloom weaver in a modest home at the base of a hill, away from the bustling high street. The Carnegie family's small cottage was filled with the rhythmic sounds of weaving looms, which were a cornerstone of their livelihood. In the early 19th century, Dunfermline was a hub of the handloom weaving industry, but this changed dramatically with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. By 1847, steam-powered looms were introduced, marking a turning point that devastated traditional handloom weavers. This technological shift not only displaced countless artisans, but also forced Andrew's father, William Carnegie, to sell their looms one by one. As their family income dwindled, Andrew's mother, Margaret Carnegie, demonstrated remarkable resilience. She transformed their front room into a small grocery shop and worked tirelessly mending shoes to support her family. Her ambition was to maintain respectability and strive for social equality despite their economic hardships. The decline in their fortunes was a source of deep embarrassment for Margaret, which Andrew keenly felt, especially given her apparent favoritism towards his younger brother Tom. The harsh winter of 1848 epitomized their struggle. Many of their neighbors faced severe poverty, and Andrew experienced firsthand the sting of deprivation. He recalled witnessing his father's desperate attempts to find work, a memory that left a lasting impact on him. The sight of his mother's anxious waiting only cemented Andrew's resolve to overcome their dire circumstances. From his mother, Andrew learned the value of frugality, a lesson he took with him into his school years. When asked by his teacher to recite a biblical proverb, Andrew's response, "Look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves," drew giggles from his classmates and a stern reprimand from the master. Despite the mockery, this lesson from his mother remained a guiding principle in his life. Carnegie's childhood was set against the backdrop of Scotland's rich history, including the ancient Abbey Church of Dunfermline, a symbol of Scotland's religious heritage. Although his family was politically radical, opposing the monarchy and inherited privilege, they enjoyed walking through the Abbey's grounds. Andrew's grandfather, Tom Morrison, and his uncle led a campaign against the local Laird of Pittencrieff, a figure of privilege and power. Their radical views led to their exclusion from the annual opening of the Laird's private park, a small but poignant rebellion against the entrenched social order. This conflict between his family's radical ideals and his mother's materialistic ambitions created an internal struggle for Andrew. His mother's desire to rise in status led them to auction their possessions and move to America, where they joined a wave of 190,000 British emigrants fleeing economic hardship in 1848. With only $20 borrowed for the passage, they relocated to Pittsburgh, hoping for a fresh start. Upon arriving in Pittsburgh, the Carnegie family found themselves in a grim industrial landscape, far removed from the romanticized image of Scotland. They settled in Slabtown, a poor neighborhood, where Andrew's aunt provided them with 2 small rooms. At age 13, Andrew began working in a textile factory, laboring 12 hours a day and facing the constant fear of boiler explosions, a stark contrast to his early weaving days. Andrew's escape from this grueling environment came with the rise of a new technological marvel: instantaneous long-distance communication. In 1849, he joined a telegraph office as a messenger boy. Driven by a determination to succeed, Andrew memorized every street in downtown Pittsburgh and seized every opportunity to impress influential businessmen, setting the stage for his remarkable ascent. Andrew Carnegie never forgot the faces of the influential people he encountered during his early career. When he saw these individuals on the streets of Pittsburgh, he would greet them warmly with a "Good morning, Mr. So-and-so." This was not merely a polite gesture, but a strategic move to ingratiate himself and gain valuable insights into Pittsburgh's business landscape. By being present in the city's commercial establishments, Carnegie became privy to critical information about prominent business figures, their credit ratings, reputations, and the inner workings of their enterprises. This ability to seize opportunities and gather intelligence was a hallmark of his burgeoning career. One spring evening, while Andrew was dispatching messages via steamboat down the Ohio River, he encountered his father, who was heading to Cincinnati to sell tablecloths. To Andrew's dismay, he found his father traveling in modest conditions, unable even to afford a cabin for the cold night. This stark contrast highlighted the disparity between the young Carnegie, who was on the cusp of success, and his father, whose fortunes had faltered in America. Andrew's father, his voice tinged with defeat, expressed pride in his son, a gesture Andrew received as a compliment, oblivious to the profound sense of failure in his father's eyes. William Carnegie, who had migrated to America with dreams of prosperity, died at age 51, a victim of the very industrial forces that had reshaped the economy. His demise marked the end of one era and the beginning of another for Andrew, whose career was just taking off. Andrew Carnegie secured a position with the Pennsylvania Railroad, one of America's leading railroads. Here, he found a mentor and father figure in Thomas A. Scott, the superintendent of the Western Division. Scott, who frequently visited the telegraph office, recognized Carnegie's potential. Both men shared a similar background, rising from poverty to ambition, and Scott, impressed by Carnegie's energy and optimism, hired him as his telegrapher and assistant at a salary of $35 per month. The opportunity to work with Scott was irresistible to the 17-year-old Carnegie, who relished riding the rails alongside engineers. He admired Scott immensely, viewing him as a model of success and ambition. Carnegie's youthful hero worship of Scott was expressed in his writings, where he credited Scott with shaping his understanding of the railroad industry. One day, Carnegie returned home to find his mother, Margaret, weeping, an unusual sight for the stoic woman who had managed their family through hardship. Carnegie reassured her, promising that he would ensure their future prosperity, including the luxury of riding in a coach through Dunfermline's streets. This promise became Carnegie's driving goal: to achieve enough wealth to provide his mother with the life she had longed for. As his career advanced, Carnegie moved his family to a house on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, away from the city's smoke and grime. Margaret hired a servant, and while his younger brother Tom completed his education, Andrew continued to forge ahead. During a critical moment when Scott was absent, Carnegie took charge of a railroad crisis involving a wreck that had halted train operations. Despite lacking formal authority, Carnegie issued directives to address the situation, signing them with Scott's name to expedite action. When Scott returned, he was initially silent about Carnegie's actions. However, it soon became known that Scott praised Carnegie's bold decision to burn the wrecked cars to minimize delays, an innovative approach that became standard practice. Carnegie's contributions extended beyond crisis management. He and Scott worked together to develop larger cars, more powerful locomotives, and longer trains, all aimed at reducing costs and improving efficiency. Their efforts also included pioneering the continuous operation of telegraph stations and 24-hour train service, setting new standards in the industry. Carnegie learned from his mentor, Thomas A. Scott, the strategies that made the Pennsylvania Railroad a global model of efficiency. Under Scott's guidance, Carnegie grasped the importance of cutting costs by maintaining high-speed operations and ensuring full utilization of resources. To achieve this, the railroad implemented stringent measures such as demanding 13-hour workdays and reducing wages. Strikes like the one called by freight workers in the winter of 1856 were addressed decisively. When maintenance workers threatened a strike, Carnegie swiftly compiled a list of those involved, leading to their dismissal, a harsh but effective move to prevent disruptions. Scott's methods also included the use of spies to monitor labor discontent, a practice Carnegie would later adopt. As the railroad expanded westward, Scott taught Carnegie the principles of profitability in an era of unregulated business. They both invested in Theodore Woodruff's innovative sleeping cars, which, although Woodruff eventually faced bankruptcy, proved lucrative. Carnegie's initial $217 investment yielded $5,000 annually. Foreseeing the obsolescence of wooden bridges, Carnegie established a company to manufacture iron bridges. To avoid conflicts of interest, he held shares in his name, while railroad president J. Edgar Thompson placed his shares in his wife's name. This allowed them to purchase iron bridges for the Pennsylvania Railroad from Carnegie's company, integrating their business interests. Carnegie's ventures along the railroad lines became so profitable that his salary of $3,400 per year from the railroad represented only a small fraction, 5%, of his total income. In 1865, he left the railroad to focus on his other investments. Carnegie, still a bachelor, moved with his mother, Margaret, to New York City, taking up residence at the St. Nicholas Hotel, one of the city's most fashionable establishments. This move marked a significant change from their earlier life, from traveling steerage and stitching shoes in the squalor of Slabtown to enjoying the comforts of luxury. Despite his wealth, Carnegie was dissatisfied. At 33, he assessed his life and resolved to work for just 2 more years before dedicating himself to philanthropic endeavors. He wrote himself a letter expressing his intention to leave behind the pursuit of wealth, which he felt was degrading and contrary to his values. Influenced by his father's emphasis on altruism, his uncle's political egalitarianism, and his grandfather's anti-aristocratic stance, Carnegie sought a higher purpose. During the Gilded Age marked by the rise of industrial elites, Carnegie encountered the ideas of English philosopher Herbert Spencer, who justified the survival of the fittest in a competitive market. Spencer's doctrine, which saw the success of individuals like Carnegie as a natural outcome of evolution, provided Carnegie with intellectual justification for his own achievements. Spencer's philosophy distilled into Carnegie's motto, "All is well since all grows better," and his simpler phrase, "upward and onward," helped dispel Carnegie's doubts about the morality of his success. In 1872, after working beyond the 2 years he had initially pledged, Carnegie's visit to England further solidified his resolve. He observed the advancements in steel production, particularly Henry Bessemer's revolutionary process that converted large batches of iron into steel, signaling the end of the era of iron. Carnegie invested heavily in a new steel plant at Braddock near Pittsburgh and began acquiring Bessemer converters. A dramatic turn occurred when Carnegie received a desperate call from Tom Scott, who faced financial ruin due to risky investments in the Texas Railroad. Carnegie, now successful and financially secure, was asked to help. Despite their long history and Scott's early support of Carnegie's ambitions, Carnegie declined, unwilling to jeopardize his own financial stability. This decision deeply hurt Scott, leading to personal and professional estrangement. 5 years later, when Scott fell ill and traveled to Europe to recuperate, Carnegie wrote a heartfelt letter expressing regret for their estrangement, acknowledging the depth of his attachment and debt to Scott. This letter reflected Carnegie's lingering guilt and the impact of his decision. In 1873, Carnegie fully committed to steel manufacturing, opening his new plant at Braddock. The August 22, 1875, launch of the plant showcased modern industry's capabilities, with steel rails being produced efficiently. Carnegie's approach was revolutionary. He demanded a share of the rail market equal to the largest players, revealing their profit margins and operational costs. His strategy was to outcompete them by leveraging the efficiency of his plant. Carnegie's meticulous attention to cost control and high-volume production became central to his success. He implemented rigorous cost-tracking measures, adhering to his principle that watch the costs and the profits will take care of themselves. His plant, with its high-speed operations and focus on efficiency, epitomized the Industrial Revolution's advancements. In New York, Carnegie adopted a rigorous management style. He pushed his managers to foster a spirit of competition among workers. This approach proved effective. By pitting one furnace against another in a weekly competition, with the reward being the display of a steel broom atop the smokestack, Carnegie tapped into the competitive spirit of America. Workers, motivated by the desire to outperform their peers, embraced this challenge. However, Carnegie's response to any record-breaking achievement was always to raise the bar for the next week, pushing for ever greater productivity. This relentless competition came at a cost. Workers labored 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, with only the 4th of July as a break. The efficiency of the plant was prioritized over worker welfare. Skilled labor was increasingly replaced by unskilled machine tenders, making workers easily replaceable and often dehumanized. The shift from the age of wrought iron to steel brought about significant changes in the industry. Craftsmen, who had once controlled the process of making wrought iron in small batches, now faced obsolescence. The traditional methods involving artistic judgment of color and flame were replaced by the more mechanical Bessemer process. This transition not only altered the industry, but also the control within the workplace. The skilled craftsmen, known as puddlers, were now being pushed aside as the industry moved towards more standardized and efficient production methods. Carnegie's management style and his drive for efficiency led to fierce battles with workers and their unions over wages and working conditions. The days of skilled craftsmanship in the mills were numbered, as the Industrial Revolution's advances increasingly marginalized these workers. Carnegie's commitment to efficiency and progress came at the expense of the human costs of industrialization. Carnegie's foresight and willingness to invest heavily in new technologies set him apart from other businessmen of the time. While his approach was often seen as audacious and reckless, it proved successful. His steel mills, with their high efficiency and low costs, were able to produce cheap steel that fueled the nation's growth. In 1878, Carnegie secured the contract to supply structural steel for the Brooklyn Bridge. The bridge, a symbol of modern engineering, showcased the technological advancements and the importance of steel in American progress. Carnegie, proud of his achievements, invited his English mentor, Herbert Spencer, to visit Pittsburgh and witness the industrial utopia Carnegie had helped create. However, Spencer found the reality of Pittsburgh's industrial landscape far from the utopian vision Carnegie had hoped to present. He remarked that 6 months in Pittsburgh would be justification for suicide, highlighting the harsh conditions and the grim reality of industrial life. In 1881, Carnegie fulfilled a promise made to his mother, Margaret. They returned to Dunfermline, Scotland, where they had left in poverty 33 years earlier. Carnegie, now a wealthy industrialist, wanted to share this triumph with his friend Louise Whitfield, a 24-year-old New York merchant's daughter whom he had courted. Despite the unconventional nature of the invitation, Louise joined Carnegie and his mother on the trip, adding a personal touch to their return. Upon returning to America, Carnegie acquired the Homestead Steel Works, another major steel plant. This mill, with its new open hearth furnaces, represented the future of steel production. The conditions at Homestead were harsh, described by novelists and journalists as a place of intense heat, noise, and danger. The town of Homestead was similarly bleak, with poor sanitation and a stark division between the skilled workers and the unskilled laborers. Despite the grim conditions, the mill created a sense of brotherhood among its workers. The mill and the community were intertwined, with the workers' unions playing a significant role in running both the town and the mill. The strikes that had led to Carnegie's acquisition of the plant now became his challenge to address, marking a new chapter in his industrial empire. Homestead Steel Works was a focal point in the labor movement of the late 19th century, renowned not only for its industrial achievements, but also for its intense labor struggles. The plant was situated in a community deeply rooted in worker solidarity, where unions like the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers and the Knights of Labor were prominent. These organizations were notable for their inter-ethnic solidarity, a progressive feature by the standards of the time, reflecting a commitment to collective labor politics that challenged the prevailing capitalist norms. Homestead was pivotal in American industrial history, contributing to significant advancements such as the structural steel for early skyscrapers and the armor plate that revolutionized naval warfare by transitioning from wooden hulls to steel ones. However, its most dramatic legacy is linked to the conflict between its workforce and Andrew Carnegie, a key player in American industrialization. To manage the Homestead Mill, Carnegie enlisted the help of Henry Clay Frick, a formidable figure in the coal industry. Their partnership, forged unexpectedly during a lunch at New York's Windsor Hotel, was initially driven by Carnegie's desire for access to Frick's vast coke reserves. Coke, essential for steel production, was a critical component for Carnegie's operations, and securing a reliable supply was vital for maintaining his competitive edge. Frick, a quintessential Gilded Age capitalist, had rapidly ascended from modest beginnings to dominate the coke industry, his success driven by a combination of strategic acumen and relentless work ethic. Carnegie's strategic alliance with Frick extended beyond mere resource acquisition. It included leveraging Frick's managerial prowess and vision for technological advancement. Together, they embarked on aggressive business strategies, including countering competitive threats such as the Duquesne Works, which had introduced innovative cost-cutting technologies. The Duquesne Works posed a significant challenge to Carnegie's dominance. Their continuous rolling process bypassed the costly reheating step, directly threatening Carnegie's market. In response, Carnegie engaged in a campaign of disinformation, disseminating warnings about the purported lack of homogeneity in Duquesne steel. Although the term was obscure and the claims unsubstantiated, they served to dissuade railroads from purchasing Duquesne steel, thus undermining its market position. Carnegie's tactics proved effective, leading to Frick's acquisition of the Duquesne Works, in a deal that was considered one of the most advantageous industrial transactions of the 19th century. Frick's effectiveness as Carnegie's chief executive was evident in the financial results, with profits nearly doubling within his first year. Despite these successes, Carnegie's personal life was marred by significant trials. In 1886, while recuperating at his retreat in Cresson, Carnegie dealt with familial and personal crises. His brother Thomas, whose health had deteriorated due to alcoholism, passed away in October at the age of 43. The death was compounded by the severe illness of Carnegie's mother, Margaret, who had contracted pneumonia. Carnegie's emotional and intellectual struggles during this period, exacerbated by his personal insecurities and the perceived favoritism towards Thomas, highlighted the complex interplay between his personal and professional life. In November 1886, during a period of significant personal and professional upheaval, Andrew Carnegie faced a profound crisis. At this time, Carnegie was ill, and his close associate Bob read to him the somber news that his beloved mother, Margaret Carnegie, had passed away from pneumonia. The news was particularly distressing, as Carnegie was known to be fragile in health, and the fear of exacerbating his condition led them to take extraordinary measures. To prevent Carnegie from hearing the sound of his mother's coffin being carried past his room, they lowered it out of the window. It was only a week later that Carnegie was informed of her death, a revelation that left him deeply devastated. In the midst of this turmoil, Carnegie sought solace and connection with his future wife, Louise Whitfield. In a poignant letter written in late November, he declared his undying devotion to her, stating, "As I see the great light once more, my first word is to you. I am now wholly yours. I live in you now till death. Louise, yours alone." Their union was formalized 5 months later in a private ceremony. Louise, in her correspondence from their honeymoon in Scotland, observed a significant change in Carnegie's demeanor, noting that he was so much more thoughtful in little things than before we were married. However, she also struggled with the demands of Carnegie's social obligations, expressing her realization of the sacrifices required of a woman in such a high-profile marriage. Louise's sentiments revealed the strain of her new role, contrasting sharply with the perception of Carnegie's character. Despite her initial excitement, she could not entirely suppress her dissatisfaction. In retrospect, she revealed her feelings about Margaret Carnegie, describing her as the most unpleasant woman I had ever known. During the same period, Andrew Carnegie published Triumphant Democracy, a best-selling work extolling the promise of America realized through industrial progress. Yet, this optimism was in stark contrast to the harsh realities faced by American workers. The previous decade had seen widespread labor unrest, culminating in the violent railroad strikes of 1877, where Pittsburgh strikers burned freight cars in protest of wage cuts. The industrial upheaval had led many workers to feel trapped in a system that promised upward mobility but delivered only exploitation. In response to the growing discontent, Carnegie, influenced by his radical forebearers, published an essay advocating for workers' rights to organize into unions. This stance was seen as revolutionary, and while labor leaders in 1886 called for a nationwide strike for an 8-hour workday, violence erupted, most notably in Chicago's Haymarket Square, where a bomb detonated at a labor rally, leading to police violence. Carnegie's subsequent writings attempted to address the tensions between labor and management. He proposed a new commandment, "Thou shalt not take thy neighbor's job," a plea for understanding amidst labor's struggles. While labor leaders viewed this as a Magna Carta of sorts, Carnegie's peers saw it as an affront to business interests, potentially inciting further unrest and undermining management authority. Among Carnegie's detractors was his business partner Henry Clay Frick, who held a contrasting view. Frick, influenced by his German Mennonite upbringing, adopted a hardline stance on labor relations, believing that workers were mere commodities with no intrinsic rights. This philosophy was evident in Frick's handling of strikes, including his aggressive response to labor unrest in 1884, and his decision to replace striking workers with immigrants in 1887. The tension between Carnegie's progressive ideals and Frick's rigid management style came to a head during a major strike at Carnegie's Edgar Thomson Works. Frick, initially adamant in his refusal to concede to labor demands, was eventually compelled by Carnegie's directive to settle the strike and grant the union's demands. This concession was met with Frick's ire, but demonstrated Carnegie's willingness to navigate complex labor relations while maintaining his business interests. In a dramatic display of his commitment to fair labor practices, Carnegie emerged as a mediator in the strike, ultimately securing a resolution through diplomacy rather than conflict. His approach, detailed in his autobiography, painted him as a benevolent employer. However, this portrayal glossed over the more contentious aspects of his methods, including his role in crushing labor unions and using economic pressure to enforce compliance. In March 1889, Carnegie further cemented his legacy by donating a magnificent library to Braddock, Pennsylvania, the site of his Edgar Thomson Works. This library was not merely a repository of books, but a community center with facilities for music and athletics, reflecting Carnegie's vision of blending industrial success with social improvement. In his dedication of the library to Braddock, Andrew Carnegie emphasized the moral duty of the wealthy to contribute to the public good, a theme he would later formalize in his influential essay, The Gospel of Wealth. He described the library as a testament to his partnership with the workers of Braddock, suggesting that a similar library might be built in Homestead. However, this proposal was contingent upon the workers relinquishing their union affiliations. Carnegie's conditional offer was not well received by the workers and their unions in Homestead. At that time, across the river in Homestead, the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers was the last union present in Carnegie's steel plants. By the summer of 1889, the union had successfully negotiated concessions from Carnegie, emerging from these negotiations more resolute and influential than before. However, with Henry Clay Frick now at the helm, a more stringent approach to labor relations was imminent. Frick, known for his uncompromising stance on labor, faced a severe challenge in his coke fields. In 1887, the workers, primarily Hungarian and Slovak immigrants, refused to accept the wages offered by the H.C. Frick Coke Company. Their refusal led to intense conflicts, marked by violent confrontations and significant property damage. Frick's response was to depict these workers as unassimilated, un-American, and the manipulators of labor leaders. He argued that the law must prevail over mob violence. In a decisive move, Frick, with the support of the Pennsylvania militia, reopened his coke ovens after a protracted struggle. The confrontation, which included the killing of 7 strikers at the Morewood plant, ended with the replacement of the striking workers by Italians who were protected by Pinkerton guards. Frick's actions effectively crushed the union, and Carnegie, though aware of the situation, chose not to intervene. By 1892, Carnegie and Frick had managed to stabilize their labor costs, except at Homestead, where the amalgamated union remained strong. Carnegie had invested in modern machinery at Homestead, reducing the number of skilled workers needed and shifting away from traditional craftsmanship. The union, dominated by older craftsmen, opposed these changes and had significant influence over hiring and operational procedures. Homestead's mayor, John McLaughlin, and other activists held steadfast beliefs in the American workers' right to fair employment and adequate living standards. They viewed Carnegie's vast wealth and control over workers' livelihoods as a form of tyranny and a regression rather than progress. As the union's contract was nearing expiration in the spring of 1892, Carnegie, then vacationing in the Scottish Highlands, was largely inaccessible. He instructed Frick to shut down the plant if necessary and supported whatever measures were required to secure the company's position. Frick responded by constructing a massive high fence around the plant, which workers derisively dubbed Fort Frick. On June 25th, Frick declared that the company would no longer negotiate with the union, but only with workers individually. Despite the union leaders' willingness to make concessions, they struggled to reach Carnegie, who was out of reach. Frick's strategy was to replace union workers with non-union labor. As tensions escalated, Frick began closing down operations, locking out 1,100 workers on July 1st. The remaining 2,400 workers went on strike, leading to a complete halt in production. Frick planned to reopen the mill on July 6th with a non-union workforce, igniting a fierce struggle. The conflict at Homestead in 1892 encapsulated broader themes of property rights and American labor rights. The workers felt a deep connection to the mill, believing their labor had contributed to its value and that they had a stake in its operation. This clash reflected the tensions between emerging industrial practices and traditional notions of workers' rights, with national media attention focusing on the implications for the future of American industry and unionism. Henry Clay Frick, facing the increasing unrest at Homestead, requested the sheriff to post notices announcing his intention to protect the mill. The workers promptly tore these notices down. Recognizing the limitations of local law enforcement, Frick turned to the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, known for their previous success in suppressing labor unrest. On the morning of July 6, 1892, 2 barges carrying 300 armed Pinkerton agents were slowly towed up the Monongahela River towards Homestead. The town's residents, united behind Mayor John McLaughlin, were resolute. McLaughlin declared, "We have our homes, churches and cemeteries here, and we are bound to Homestead by all the ties that men hold dearest and most sacred." He emphasized that Carnegie's company had never imported workers into Homestead and would not do so now. Meanwhile, in Scotland, Carnegie was enjoying his vacation, having recently dedicated a library in nearby Aberdeen to great acclaim. As he tested new fishing flies in the Highland trout streams, Union lookouts observed the Pinkertons' approach. Pittsburgh journalists reported that a frantic horseman sped through Homestead at around 3 a.m., spreading alarm among the workers. Women and children rushed to the riverbanks, sensing the gravity of the situation. The New York Times noted the conflict's intensity, declaring, "The fight there is to be to the death." Before dawn, the barges landed near the pump house, but the Pinkertons were met with resistance. The workers, armed with rifles and pistols, pleaded with the Pinkertons to stay off the shore, but their pleas were ignored. The exact moment when the first shot was fired remains unknown, but for nearly 14 hours, the workers and Pinkertons exchanged gunfire. The strikers set a freight car ablaze and attempted to ignite the barges with dynamite and oil. By 4 p.m., the Pinkertons surrendered, having suffered significant casualties. 3 detectives and 9 workers were dead or dying. Despite their victory, the workers began to lose their advantage. The Union leaders, despite promising safe passage, struggled to control the enraged mob. The Pinkertons, who had been routed and physically assaulted, were eventually put on a night train for their safety. The Pittsburgh Commercial Gazette described the scene. Twilight now being about ended, the entire riverfront was lit up, while 2,000 throats shouted hooray for Homestead. Carnegie cabled Frick from Scotland, instructing him not to rehire any of the rioters and expressing his commitment to ensuring the mill's operation. However, in a letter to his cousin George Lauder, Carnegie criticized Frick's handling of the situation, attributing the tragedy partly to poor strategic decisions rather than moral failings. As the workers continued their defense of what they considered their plant, they were dismayed to find that the Pinkertons were not arrested, but rather protected by a night train. The governor of Pennsylvania intervened, deploying the militia to reclaim the mill for Carnegie Steel. Frick brought in strikebreakers to resume operations. The strike's fortunes took a darker turn when Alexander Berkman, a Russian anarchist unaffiliated with the Union, attempted to assassinate Frick. Berkman shot Frick twice in the neck and stabbed him multiple times. Despite his severe injuries, Frick managed to maintain his composure and instructed the carpenter to leave Berkman to the law rather than seek vengeance. After the surgeons extracted the bullets without anesthesia, Frick returned to his desk to complete his work, declaring, "Don't bother coming home, Carnegie. We'll fight the strike out, even if it kills me." Though Carnegie ultimately prevailed, the victory came at a tremendous cost. His carefully cultivated image as a benevolent reformer was severely tarnished. Critics from various quarters condemned his actions. A congressman from Ohio labeled him the arch-sneak of this age, and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch opined that 10,000 Carnegie public libraries would not compensate the country for the direct and indirect evils resulting from the Homestead lockout. The Edinburgh Dispatch criticized the strike-breaking tactics as contrary to democratic values. Despite Carnegie's financial successes, his reputation suffered considerably, as the public and press decried the violent measures taken to suppress the strike and the broader implications for workers' rights and industrial relations in America. It's tempting to label Andrew Carnegie as a hypocrite, given the evident discord between his public statements and his actions. The juxtaposition of his proclaimed ideals against his practices might seem to expose a clear hypocrisy. Yet, reducing Carnegie's complex behavior to mere hypocrisy overlooks the nuanced circumstances of his era. Carnegie's adherence to labor rhetoric stands in sharp contrast to the prevailing norms of his time, where figures like Henry Clay Frick epitomized the standard management approach towards labor relations. Carnegie's public advocacy for labor rights seemed at odds with the ruthless business strategies prevalent in the late 19th century, a period marked by intense industrial strife. The Homestead Steel Strike of 1892, a crucial episode in this context, serves as a pivotal example. As Christmas approached, around 1,800 steel workers found themselves unemployed, their leaders blacklisted for life within the steel industry. The conflict led to a staggering 45-year hiatus before the formation of a steel workers' union. The aftermath saw families displaced and destitute, left to watch as the Pittsburgh Press described the site as a lost paradise. The narrative surrounding this period was not only a local, but also a European sensation. Carnegie's telegram from Italy, dismissing the Homestead affair as over and extending New Year's greetings, reflects his attempt to downplay the significance of the conflict amidst the widespread turmoil. In the same year of the Homestead battle, Henry Clay Frick retreated to Clayton, his opulent Victorian residence, recovering from a failed assassination attempt. It was at Clayton that Frick hosted Carnegie during that winter. Carnegie had been instrumental in importing a lavish automatic orchestra from Freiburg, Germany, a luxury typically reserved for royalty and Indian Maharajas. Carnegie's visit to Pittsburgh was ostensibly to bolster confidence in Frick's management, yet beneath the veneer of civility lay a growing tension. The aftermath of the strike had taken a severe toll on Frick, culminating in a nervous collapse. Personal and professional strains led to a contentious fallout between Frick and Carnegie. Frick's resignation as chief executive, though reluctantly accepted, led to his appointment as chairman of the board. In the wake of Homestead, Carnegie embarked on a transformative phase for his business. Investing heavily in new machinery and infrastructure, he sought to reduce labor costs and revamp his operations. His strategic investments in the Mesabi Ranges iron ore and the development of transportation networks, lake boats, railroads, reduced steel production costs significantly. By 1900, Carnegie's steel output surpassed that of the entire steel industry in Great Britain. Carnegie's innovations set a new benchmark for American industry, contributing to America's emergence as a global industrial powerhouse by the turn of the century. His methods revolutionized business practices and manufacturing processes, leaving an indelible mark on the American industrial landscape. The effects of Carnegie's cost-cutting and production strategies reverberated across the nation, fostering the growth of a burgeoning middle class. However, despite the era's industrial progress, the reality for steelworkers remained grim. In the 2 decades following the union's dissolution, productivity tripled, yet skilled workers' wages increased only modestly, while unskilled workers struggled to make ends meet. Without the presence of a union, neither skilled nor unskilled workers possessed the leverage to negotiate for better conditions. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, workers made several attempts to reorganize and re-establish unions in 1898, 1899, and again into the early 1900s. Carnegie, however, thwarted these efforts effectively, aided by an extensive network of corporate surveillance. In Carnegie's mills across Duquesne, Braddock, and Homestead, A system of informants kept him apprised of any labor unrest or organizing attempts. The communal spirit that once characterized Homestead had deteriorated. Observers of the period described the workers as gaunt and disheartened, with a prevailing sentiment that communication among them had become a solitary endeavor. In 1898, Carnegie returned to Homestead on a dreary day to inaugurate a new library, a grand structure that, much like the Braddock Library, housed not only a library but also a concert hall, swimming pool, bowling alleys, and gymnasium. Carnegie's visit was marked by his attempt to erase the painful memories of the Homestead strike from the public narrative. He publicly declared that the past grievances were buried in the deep bosom of the ocean and envisioned Homestead's future as represented by the new library. Despite Carnegie's public statements, his personal writings reveal that the events at Homestead continued to haunt him. In his autobiography, Carnegie admitted that the Homestead conflict remained a deep wound, one that overshadowed other business challenges he faced. He struggled to reconcile his public persona with his private feelings of guilt and regret over the strike. Carnegie's memory of the events surrounding Homestead was convenient, as he maintained that he had been unavailable and uninformed during the crisis. He became convinced that had he been aware, he would have prevented the use of Pinkerton guards and avoided the tragedy. Carnegie framed himself as a victim, contending that had he been present, the strike would not have escalated. The tension between Carnegie and Frick, which simmered for years, reached a dramatic climax in 1900 when Frick attempted to increase the price of coke, a critical component in steel production. Carnegie's response was to invoke an agreement allowing him to purchase Frick's shares at a fraction of their market value, resulting in a significant financial loss for Frick. The confrontation culminated in a heated dispute, where Frick accused Carnegie of being a goddamn cheat, and the two engaged in a legal battle that was one of the most significant private lawsuits in U.S. history. Frick, despite his loss, emerged with $31 million, making him the only person to successfully challenge Carnegie and win. The year 1900 also brought another crisis when customers began canceling orders for steel. J.P. Morgan, who was acquiring finishing plants and building his own furnaces, posed a formidable challenge to Carnegie. Carnegie, confident in his ability to outlast Morgan's firms due to his lower production costs and superior technology, was prepared for a prolonged struggle. However, at nearly 65, Carnegie was eager to focus on his philanthropic interests and spend more time with his family. During a dinner honoring Charles Schwab, who succeeded Frick as the chief executive, Schwab broached the subject of selling Carnegie steel. Carnegie, encouraged by his wife Louise, who was deeply affected by the aftermath of Homestead and eager for her husband to pursue philanthropy, agreed to negotiate. On the golf course, Schwab proposed a sale, and Carnegie presented a figure that Morgan promptly accepted. The deal, valued at $480 million, resulted in the formation of the United States Steel Corporation. Carnegie's biographer noted that the transaction, the largest sale in American industrial history, was completed with surprising simplicity. When Morgan congratulated Carnegie on becoming the richest man in the world, Carnegie mused about potentially securing an additional $100 million, to which Morgan responded that he would have paid it if asked. Post-sale, Carnegie turned to philanthropy with renewed vigor. He purchased the park at Skibo and donated it to Dunfermline, calling it the most fulfilling gift he had made. Over his lifetime, Carnegie donated $350 million, and when he could no longer dispense it quickly enough, he established the Carnegie Corporation in New York to handle his philanthropic efforts. Carnegie's later years were focused on advocating for world peace. He was an early proponent of a League of Nations and funded the construction of the Peace Palace at The Hague, now known as the World Court. His efforts to mediate global conflicts included offering to finance Theodore Roosevelt's African safari if Roosevelt would meet Kaiser Wilhelm, and he frequently corresponded with world leaders to promote peace. When World War I erupted in August 1914, Carnegie, who had just completed his autobiography reflecting on his peace efforts, was devastated. The conflict contradicted his vision of progress, and he left Skibo for the last time. Though he lived for 5 more years, his autobiography's final entry marks the beginning of the war. In his final years, Carnegie sought to mend old wounds with former partners like Henry Clay Frick. After a failed attempt to reconcile, Frick's retort was, "Tell Mr. Carnegie I'll meet him in hell where we are both going." Carnegie's legacy, as depicted in the murals of the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh, presents an idealized vision of industry, a utopia of industrious steelworkers and thriving production. These murals reflect Carnegie's fairy tale view of progress, where everything culminates in a perfect world. To delve deeper into Andrew Carnegie's impact on the American experience, subscribe to our channel.